to the deep dive. We are going to take a journey today, really digging into one of the most, well, comprehensive metaphysical structures we've seen in our source material. It's called the Great Arc.
Yeah, it's quite something.
It really is. This framework, it tries to map, well, existence itself, starting right at the infinite source of everything and following this really rigorous path all the way to what it calls recognition, resolution.
It's a huge undertaking, honestly. The material pulls together, high philosophy, very specific theological ideas, and even like quantum physics concepts.
To build one single cosmology.
Exactly. So for you listening, our job today is to guide you through it. We want to cut through the complexity pretty quickly so you can really grasp this framework's definitions of, say, individuality, the actual role of loss, which is key, and how this arc defines resolution in the end.
Right. Think of this deep dive like following a map. We've got three big signposts: source, then this idea of containment, and we end up at recognition. So let's start right at the beginning.
Okay. So when defining that, primordial state, the source material uses the term source. And it's careful to say this isn't chaos, it's not a vacuum. It's an original fullness, you could say, before anything measurable existed.
Okay.
But right away, we hit the first really crucial concept, a boundary.
And that boundary is containment, which sounds a bit counterintuitive, right? If the source is infinite, why slap a limit on it right away?
Well, because that infinite nature is the key. The source state is, by definition, total. So the argument goes, to create anything separate, any kind of localized life or individual consciousness, you need a boundary for it to even exist.
Okay.
Containment is like drawing a line, creating a structured enclosure, they call it, or a firmament. Without that boundary, any unfolding life would just be instantly, well, overwhelmed. Annihilated by infinity is the phrase used.
But it's not a prison. It's more like a necessary incubator.
Exactly. A necessary separation. It's often allegorized, in older texts, separating the waters above from the waters below.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Okay, that makes sense. A protected lab almost. And inside this enclosure, the source says the medium forms. They call it the ether.
Yes, but it's a very specific definition of ether here. It's not God. It's described as the fabric God authored.
The substrate?
Right. The substrate, think of it like this ultimate sea of vibration. The 0-point field, maybe. It's where energy density allows matter to eventually condense. It's basically the quantum field, but framed functionally.
When they say the fabric God offered, does that mean the medium itself has some kind of awareness? Or is it just a purely mechanical, canvas?
It seems to function primarily as the canvas, yeah. The possibility space, the physical arena. What's really fascinating, though, is how the source links this quantum field idea back to religious memory, reframing things like the Genesis waters or Revelation's sea of glass mingled with fire as descriptions of this fundamental vibrating medium that's underneath all reality. It's where the rules of physics get written, essentially.
That's a poetic stage almost. But okay, stage needs actors. How does this cosmology explain, well, us, how does it describe the fracturing of light needed to create individuals?
This is what it calls the descent of souls, defined as fallen light. And it's framed as an intentional choice by the source, a deliberate compression and localization of consciousness.
Okay, so fallen isn't a moral judgment here. It's literally physical. The compression of consciousness into matter. Is that the idea?
That's exactly it. The material really stresses this is a physical necessity. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
If you're a fragment of the whole, you have to be cut off from the full bandwidth, right? From the total divine radiance.
Right.
This narrowing of perception, it's what allows individuality itself to exist. We become fragments of source with limited scope. Without that compression, we're just, well, we're the totality. Indistinguishable. No unique story can happen.
So my very sense of me, my identity, is actually a result of this intentional limit, this forgetting.
Exactly. And the framework continues by looking at how those limited fragments start building their inner world. Using the analogy of childhood. Kids don't just exist near their parents.
They live inside the parent's system.
Yeah. That's the formation of the first inner map. The material says, the parent's voice is the child's physics. Their moods are the weather. Their choices define the horizon.
Wow.
Reality is learned at first entirely from the resonance of that outside mind, not some objective truth. The child builds this model of the world, a belief system, and eventually, almost inevitably, starts thinking that model is complete, that it stands on its own.
But it isn't complete.
Never. And the Great Arc guarantees that model will be tested. Which brings us to maybe the most painful, but also perhaps the most instructive part of the framework.
The moment that system breaks, the source calls it the first crack. loss. And it's not just any tragedy. It's specifically when the child's model of a predictable, contained world gets shattered. A parent dies, a friend moves away, love disappears from flesh.
And this is where the framework gets really profound, I think. It analyzes loss, not as some kind of error, something to be fixed, but as a forced revelation.
A revelation? How?
Well, think about it. If the world were just matter, loss would just be the end, an ending connection. But grief, the source argues, that persistent ache, that's proof the connection actually lives on as a pattern and imprint in your nervous system in the choices you make going forward.
So the ache isn't failure. It's the final gift. Proof that love is a resonance that goes beyond the physical body.
Precisely. The trauma of loss is used to show that the deepest reality, love, connection, isn't actually contained within that physical system the child built their map around. It forces the fragment, you, to look beyond that immediate enclosure.
And this experience of loss, it points to a bigger rule, the universal rule of this bounded system, what the source calls the larger law.
Yes, and it's inescapable. The law is essentially this. Any observer inside a system always has less capacity than the system itself.
The part cannot contain the whole.
Exactly. The moment you define the container, you also define what cannot be fully understood from within it. There's always something outside the frame.
Okay, but if that law is like mathematical, inescapable, if we, the fragment, can never truly know the whole source, why even try? Doesn't that make the whole pursuit kind of frustrating?
Well, it implies the pursuit from within the system alone is frustrating, yes.
Yeah.
But that frustration, that's the proof. The framework suggests we feel this. This residue, this sense of inadequacy every time we hit a wall trying to solve something and realize the answer is outside the box we drew. This signature of containment, this gap between what is known and what can be known from inside, that's what it calls residue.
And the source material actually brings in specific scientific and mathematical examples to support this idea of inherent limits. It talks about impossibility laws.
It does, yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting, balancing the philosophy with math and physics. It mentions Gödel's incompleteness theorems.
Right. Any complex logical system has true statements you can't prove within it.
Exactly. That's the part cannot contain the whole in pure logic. Then there's Turing's halting problem. A computer can't always predict if another program will finish. A limit on computational certainty.
And Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is in there too. The more you know about one thing, like a particle's position, the less you know about another, like its momentum.
Yeah, they're all framed as different ways of seeing the same core rule.
Yeah.
The act of observing or defining creates a necessary gap, the residue.
Okay. So if we know we're incomplete inside this container, how do we function?
That leads directly to the function of the veil.
The veil, right.
The veil is presented as truly dualistic. It's described as both a curse and a mercy.
How so?
Well, the curse is obvious. It hides the totality, makes us feel fragmented, maybe alone. But the mercy is that it hides the whole, precisely so individuality can exist in the first place. If the fragment saw everything all at once, the full infinite radiance of the source, poof, it would just dissolve back into the totality. No more you.
So the self-concealment is actually protection. The boundary makes me possible, okay? But if we realize we are fragments, limited, feeling that residue, and we sense there's something beyond the veil, the natural urge is to try and break out.
Right.
Using our intelligence, our philosophy, our science.
And the source is absolutely categorical here. That's impossible from within. It uses this great analogy, the sim cannot reach the computer.
Huh. Okay.
Every attempt from inside more science, deeper theology, whatever, just loops back inside the system's boundaries. The fragment can't bridge the gap to the whole because the tools it's using are part of the fragment's limited system. They're subject to the same impossibility law, self-salvation from within. Structurally impossible.
Wow. Okay, so that raises the absolute critical question for this whole great arc structure.
Sure.
If the sim can't climb out, how does the arc ever complete? What's the resolution that preserves the individuality that containment created?
The only resolution that's presented consistently is descent.
Descent.
The source has to step down into the system. It has to be an external action that breaks that internal loop.
When the source calls this a system-level statement, what does that mean in practice? I mean, if the sim can't talk to the computer, how does the computer talk to the sim without just becoming another character in the simulation?
It means the source essentially has to submit to the rules, the limitations of the medium it created. You know, the classic articulation is the word becomes flesh.
Right.
Or as the source puts it, maybe more dramatically, the player lifts the sim. It's an act of translation across the boundary. Exit requires an invitation from outside. Revelation needs a voice from beyond the enclosure, one the system itself simply cannot generate. It's like the hand reaching into the sandbox.
Okay. That outside intervention,
Right.
it validates the internal limits, but also provides the way forward. Which brings us, finally, to the last stage of the arc, recognition.
Yes, and crucially, recognition is not omniscience. That's really important. If it were omniscience, it would just erase the very individuality that the whole process of containment works so hard to establish.
So if I don't suddenly see the whole picture, how is recognition different from just, say, having a strong faith or a gut feeling? What's the specific evidence recognition supposedly provides, according to the source?
Recognition is framed as the ability to discern the authentic signal. The source calls it the shepherd's voice entering the field, distinct from all the other static and noise. Is that moment the fragment hears the specific frequency that resonates with its origin. The evidence isn't universal knowledge, it's internal coherence. Certainty about the unique note you are meant to sound.
And the result of hearing that note, that recognition, is coherence. The fragment vibrates back into sync with the source, but without losing its unique identity.
Exactly. The structure of the arc is preserved, the individuality remains, but the resonance is restored. The journey is completed.
So looking back then, the whole path.
If we trace the whole trajectory,
Yeah.
it really confirms the idea that this isn't some cycle of mistakes to be fixed. It's presented as a curriculum of becoming. The true chronology flows very specifically. Source right arrow, containment right arrow, medium right arrow, the descent of souls, fallen light, birth inside the field, right arrow, forming those inner maps, right arrow, the first crack, right arrow, realizing the impossibility law, residue, accepting the veil, right arrow, the descent of the source, right arrow, and finally, recognition and resonance.
That is quite a journey. From infinite light through these necessary boundaries, individual experience, loss, realization, and finally to this awakened resonance.
And what really stands out, I think, is the bold claim the sources make right at the end, that the proof is everywhere. That the signature of this arc, this inescapable contained system, and the need for something beyond it, isn't just in theology. They say you see it in every impossibility result in math and physics, in the unmeasurable qualities of the vacuum, in, a parent's quiet grief, and just in that deep human longing we all feel sometimes for something more than the container we know.
Okay, so if recognition, that final stage, is about discerning that authentic signal amid all the static and noise of our contained experience, here's a final thought for you listening to maybe carry with you. What are the characteristics of the static in your own life? The internal noise, the assumptions you can't quite prove, those frustrating loops. What's preventing you from hearing that unique, defining note?